my great-grandchildren are going to be like, Grandma, you never come to visit us. And I'm going to be like, you're right. Because I'm not teleporting my body. They kill you, you know? It's just a facsimile of you that appears on the other side. I'm going to be like, Grandma, you are crazy. Welcome to Mistopian, the podcast that evaluates the past's problematically inaccurate predictions about the future that we now live in. Because why have mind control devices when you can have Fox News instead?
You're supposed to say two different things, Alex.
I am your host, Alex, joined here by my co-host,
Patrick.
Patrick, I've got kind of an existential question that I'm going to hit you with, like, right at the top of this podcast, so just buckle in.
Oof. Alex, we're recording this in the morning. It's early.
Okay, so here's my existential question. What do you feel like makes you, like, as a person? Do you think it's your memory? Is it your personality, your lived experience? Do you think it's just the interaction of various slime chemicals in the brain? What do you think makes you you?
I think it's the sum total of trauma.
What?
I don't know.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know.
So experiences.
It is interesting to think about brain chemicals. I've read articles about people who, for whatever reason, medications or something's changed with their brain chemistry, and they become almost completely different people.
Sure, you see that with brain injury patients all the time. They, are cognitively fine, but their personality changes.
Yeah. So presumably brain chemistry, but also, there is something ephemeral about exactly who we are that is very difficult to pin down.
Right. And that's kind of what we're going to be exploring today. So, follow-up question to that. If you believed, because you think everything's kind of in your brain. So if you had the ability to, I hate to use the word hack because I feel like everything's a hack nowadays.
If I could biohack my brain, bruh.
But if you actually legitimately could, like Matrix style, hack into your brain, change things about you, would you do it?
Yes.
There was no hesitation.
No.
Why?
Because you would do it to improve yourself in different ways. Like, what if I could just turn on laser focus?
Mm-hmm.
What if I could turn on, speed reading?
Sure.
Yeah, I would do that.
If you could remove memories from your own brain, would you?
Depends on the memory.
Okay, but it's up for negotiation.
Sure. I, like most people, have those awkward, embarrassing memories that, you'd rather not live in your brain. That always come up at 11:30 at night. Yeah, I would take those out.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm starting broad to get specific because a lot of these ideas and themes are covered in a TV show that came on in 2009, 2010 called Dollhouse, which was produced and conceived by Joss Whedon.
What you hear is the sound of dozens. I was about to say millions of people. Dozens of people turning off their podcast.
All right, so hear me out. So I 100% get it. I was somebody who grew up being a big Joss Whedon fan. Buffy and Angel and Dollhouse and Firefly. Those were such formative shows for me in my teen years and my college years. Joss Whedon, I think for a lot of us that grew up during that time, meant a lot to us. And his shows meant a lot to us. And I loved his strong female characters and all of that. And so when everything kind of happened with Joss Whedon, when everything started to turn a few years ago and all of the allegations started to come out about him, I assume many others, really wrestled with the idea of where does that leave me? Those of us who grew up with Harry Potter wrestle with the same thing with J.K. Rowling. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for media that we choose to consume?
It is one of those markers of the dystopian future that we currently live in. Nobody in, say, 1910 struggled with whether or not they should still say, Mark Twain.
Sure.
But now we are constantly confronted with the bad actions of the people who create things that mean a tremendous amount to us. Woody Allen, like you said, J.K. Rowling. And some of these people are worse than others.
Right.
But we're always like, how do I feel watching this now? Like, I couldn't watch The Cosby Show now.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, we could talk for a whole episode about art and artists and to what extent do you separate it. And it's never going to feel clean. It's never going to feel neat. It's never going to feel perfect. Do I still read Harry Potter? Do I still enjoy Harry Potter? Yes, I do. That meant so much to me growing up. I try to pretend, I think, that the books just like appeared out of the ether.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I treat it. But at the same time, I don't really want to watch Roman Polanski stuff.
Right.
And I can't articulate or explain that, but I do think that everybody has their own limits.
I think there's really two different divisions of that, though.
Mm-hmm.
In that, one, knowing what you know, do you then enter into watching something, is different than when you already love something.
Right.
And then you find out, do you excise that from the part of you that, like, it was really important to you?
Right. That's a fantastic point. I obviously didn't know these things about Joss Whedon when I was watching Buffy live. Nobody knew about those allegations. And so am I still allowed to enjoy and watch those things versus I never really watched Woody Allen growing up. I didn't watch Woody Allen movies. And so now I just kind of choose not to. And
Right.
I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
Yeah.
But I love Buffy. I
Yeah.
love this show, Dollhouse. And so I think everybody individually has to decide for themselves. I don't think that you can have anybody tell you, that you can't listen to this anymore. You can't watch this anymore. So I definitely did wrestle with, do I want to do Dollhouse? Do I actually want to do this? And I decided I do. I also think that there's some aspects, maybe this is because I have acting and theater experience. There's a lot about movies and TV shows and theater that is a very collaborative experience.
It is not just the vision of one person.
And I feel like for me, especially when it comes to TV shows and to some extent movies, being an actress, granted I do stage stuff, I don't really do movies and TV shows, that's kind of how I think of it. It is such a collaborative effort. And the director or the showrunner or the writer or whoever, they're just one person amongst so many other people that made that amazing. Eliza Dushku, who is the star of Dollhouse, she was a producer on that. This show was formed literally after Eliza Dushku was done playing Faith in Buffy and Angel, like sitting down with Joss Whedon and having lunch and him saying, like, where do you want your career to go next? And her helping to develop this show. I feel like if I were to say, I'm never going to watch this show again, I don't want to have anything to do with it, yes, it would be a rejection of Joss Whedon, but it would also be a rejection of people who haven't done anything wrong and people who worked really hard to make something great and enjoyable and that they could be proud of.
Yeah, I think that's at a very good point. Do we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak?
Right. And it gets harder when you're talking about a book, which was written by a single author. Like, I could never go back to reading Mist of Avalon with Marion Zimmer Bradley after learning about the abuse that she enacted on her child, and that's a single person, right? So it's easier to reject that. Orson Scott Card, another example of that. But for something like this TV show, Joss Whedon, absolutely an asshole. I think that is obvious. I think he has admitted to enough to where it's not even ambiguous as to whether or not he was.
Right. He's kind of admitted but not truly apologized.
Right. Like, he has clearly been a terrible husband, a terrible boss, a bad director, a bad friend, all of those things. But he, as far as I know, hasn't done anything criminal.
Right.
Just done really shady, inappropriate, unethical things.
Yeah.
There was shockingly misogynistic behavior with the way that he treated Charisma Carpenter, allegedly, when she became pregnant on Angel. Just some really problematic stuff.
And if you did love Dollhouse, you're probably grappling with this as well.
Yeah. So regarding the Joss Whedon controversy, I'm certainly not going to tell people whether they should or shouldn't watch any Joss Whedon stuff. That is 100% up to you. If you do want to ever watch Dollhouse, we are going to be going into some major spoilers in this episode. So if you really, really want to watch the show and you don't want any spoilers, I'm going to say, like, pause now and go binge it. And then come back and we'll talk about it. Okay, so Dollhouse. As I said, it aired from 2009 to 2010. It only ran for 2 seasons, so I could talk to you a little bit about kind of the general premise, and then we go into the prediction, the futuristic technology part of it.
Okay, so you've been watching this for the past couple of weeks, and I have been on my phone while it was on, so I really don't understand it that well.
No. You'll occasionally glance up and you're like, huh, that guy. Because as we all know, those of you who are familiar with Joss Whedon, he tends to cast the same people over and over. So the technology that is in the show was 100% futuristic, did not exist in 2009, 2010, and we'll get into to what extent does it even exist now.
Okay.
But it was meant to be a current show. It was set in 2009, 2010. And what makes it futuristic and what makes it appropriate for the podcast is that there are 2 episodes. It is the last episode of season 1 and then the series finale that are set in 2019 or 2020. Okay. So they did do this like smash cut basically to the future, where it was like dealing with the fallout of the technology that was supposedly, quote unquote, secretly invented in 2009.
Okay.
So, here is the premise of Dollhouse. You have this secretive, mysterious corporation, you know, like Umbrella Corporation kind of thing, doing weird technology stuff.
One of my favorite tropes in fiction is the weird, secretive corporation.
Right. Nameless, faceless kind of thing. Although they are not nameless. They are the Rossum Corporation.
Oh, I hold stock in Rossum.
Oh, interesting. Rossum, this is just a fun little trivia thing, is not named after a person. It actually comes from this play that was written in the 1920s that features the first use of the word robot.
Oh, wow. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like Rossum's Robots was created, so the Rossum Corporation. And this corporation does a ton of shady stuff, but the focus of...
so they're a normal corporation.
Yeah, right. The specific focus in the technology here is that you take people, ordinary citizens who are usually going through some sort of like bad place in their lives. It could be like dealing with trauma or like they need to kind of escape for a little bit. They need to essentially like turn their brain off.
Okay.
And you find out that later on that not all these people are exactly volunteers.
Oh, okay.
But you're led to believe that these are all volunteer people who have basically signed a contract for 5 years.
Okay.
Where they will have their whole existence, like their personality and stuff, erased from their brain. It's like a mind-wiping thing. And they will be put in this, we'll say, doll state. They're called dolls or actives, where they are very pure and just kind of blank slate is what they call it, like tabula rasa.
All right.
And then they're not gone. They have their brains kind of put on a hard drive and put into storage for like 5 years. And then these dolls get imprinted with these other personas and personalities. So you can essentially turn them into whoever you want them to be.
Are these artificially created personas?
Sort of.
Okay.
So they do a lot of pseudoscience,
right,
you know, in the show, pseudo tech talk. And the guy who does all the tech stuff, who I think is supposed to be kind of like a Joss Whedon stand-in, but whatever, has said that you can't just create a person out of nothing. So they take these existing brain scans where they've like uploaded people. They're never really quite specific as to where they get these personalities or these people.
Okay. And
they put those in them. So it could be a whole person, like a whole person's brain, which we've seen in some episodes, or it could be kind of a composite. Where you're taking like a little piece of this person, a little piece of that person, and putting them all together to get the exact type of personality that you want.
A little bit of Monica.
Right. I mean, but it does let you have the ability to kind of craft the perfect person for whatever the situation is.
It sounds like it could be terribly abusive.
It's right off the bat. It's immediately abusive. And I will say that it seems like, because obviously this is very expensive, and so it's a very rich clientele, or if not outright rich, then very influential clientele. So like senators and things like that. Mostly used for sex, honestly.
Well, that's some realism.
Yeah, like you have this amazing technology that lets you make a human being into whoever you want them to be, and it's mostly for men to have sex with you.
Do the people who sign up for these 5-year contracts understand that?
No, I get the sense that it's not quite communicated to them what their bodies essentially will be doing. Because it's like your brain's gone, like you are gone, and your body's just used as like a meat puppet.
So,
for 5 years?
So one of my favorite jokes to make is blank and blank would be a great name for my band, or that's my favorite so-and-so album. The Meat Puppets are a real band.
Dollhouse and the Meat Puppets. The Meat Puppets are a real band?
Absolutely.
Oh.
A huge influence on Nirvana. They covered several Meat Puppet songs on their Unplugged album.
Wow.
So there you go. Little Pat fact for the middle of this episode.
That's a Pat fact. So obviously the show really hits hard the themes of what is identity, what is consciousness, what is free will. You see glimpses where it's clear that the dolls' brains aren't as like wiped as they would believe them to be. They'll still get snatches of their past selves, some more than others. They're always wiped in between assignments, but sometimes they maintain kind of like vestigial things that kind of cling to them.
So if I had signed up for this and they wiped the Patrick brain,
right,
and they input, I don't know, say like a smart person.
Why is that what you go with?
And then every once in a while, just the worst joke in the world would just come out, and they're like, hold on a second.
This doesn't sound right.
This doesn't sound right.
Yeah, and so it follows this main character known as Echo. All of the dolls in this particular dollhouse go by NATO alphabet names. So you've got Alpha, who winds up being a bad guy, Echo, Whiskey, stuff like that.
So there are exactly 26 of them?
So that's the weird thing. There's clearly way more than 26.
Okay.
I don't know what the other ones are named.
Okay.
And there's other dollhouses throughout the world. At first you think that this is the only one, but then you hear about like the Washington, D.C. dollhouse, and they later open up a Dubai dollhouse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you see any other dollhouse, they have different naming systems. So like the D.C. one uses Greek gods.
Oh, okay.
So like Hera and Zeus and all of that. So I think they get their own little flavor. So you have these actives, sometimes referred to as dolls. Each of them has a handler. They undergo this process by which they will trust this handler completely, no matter what personality they're set with.
Like they're programmed to do that?
They're programmed to trust this person. So if things get sketchy out there, the handler can just kind of come up to them and they immediately trust this person and will go with them and kind of remove them from the situation.
You mean kind of like at Disney when you've got a person in a suit?
Yeah.
They've got somebody who's always along with them to make sure that kids aren't like hitting them in the balls.
Exactly. Yeah, like that. So these wealthy clients will hire actives for various purposes. Like I said, it's so much sex stuff, honestly.
What would be a non-sex purpose? Or is that ever demonstrated in the show?
Absolutely. There's been times where they've used them as a hostage negotiator because they didn't want to get the police involved, but they wanted somebody who was like an expert with that.
So they're able to download hostage negotiator brain.
Yeah.
And then send the person out. I bet that's really fun for the actors in the show being able to just show that type of range.
Oh my God. The acting in it is absolutely fantastic. Like everybody who is a doll is absolutely stellar in this. I love Eliza Dushku. I'm a huge fan of her. But the other actors, it's clear that they have so much fun with it. Imagine you're working an acting job and you're doing this for months at a time. Like, if you're doing one character, that can sometimes get kind of stale, kind of boring. But every week you get to go in and you get to be somebody else. And what's especially fun is there's one actor in Vera Jokai who plays Victor, one of the dolls. And he's an amazing impressionist and he does amazing accents. One of the actors on there who you might recognize, Fran Kranz. He's been in a lot of Joss Whedon stuff. He was the stoner in Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, yeah. The guy who had the coffee mug, the thermos that turns into a giant bong.
Yeah. So he plays Topher Brink. He's the quippy guy who's the tech guy. The actor who plays Victor, there's a couple of times where he gets Topher Brink's like brain in him. And so there's like two of them. And he sounds and acts so amazingly like him that if you just close your eyes, like you would think that it's Fran Kranz doing it. So I have to imagine that he had so much fun doing that. So to go through kind of all the characters, we have Eliza Dushku's character. She's the protagonist. Her name in the real world is Caroline. And you realize kind of right off the bat that there's some sort of sketchy relationship that she has with the dollhouse. It seems like she ran out of options somehow, and like this was something she had to do even though she didn't really want to.
Okay.
But then you see her as Echo, who kind of has had all of that erased, and now she's kind of blank.
Like it flits back and forth?
Yeah, there's a little bit of flashbacks to kind of tease out, like, ooh, who was Caroline? You get the sense that Echo is special in some way. She doesn't seem to forget the mind wipes as much as the other ones do. She's starting to retain memories of things and being very adaptive and being, the special, different person that you want your protagonist to be.
Right. Okay.
You have Adele DeWitt, who is the head of the dollhouse. She is played by Olivia Williams. You have Tamo Pennicott, who plays Paul Ballard. If you're a huge Battlestar Galactica fan, you might remember him as Hilo.
Okay.
In that, I am a huge fan of him. Echo's handler is Boyd Langdon, who is played by Harry Lennox. I mentioned Fran Kranz, who plays Topher Brink. Later on, you also see some, I guess you would consider them to be Joss Whedon staples, like Amy Acker plays Dr. Claire Saunders. She was in Angel. You also have Summer Glau, who appears in the second season, very famously in Firefly.
She's River?
As River, yeah, River Tam. And then you also see Alan Tudyk, also another Firefly alum. So Joss Whedon is definitely one of those people who, like, he gets his people and he uses them again and again. Emphasis on uses, but,
These are the people who can stand me.
Yeah. So those are all kind of the people. Paul Ballard, Tamo Pennicott's character, is an FBI agent who's obsessed with uncovering the dollhouse. Like, it's this conspiracy, and apparently people in LA have had rumors of it since as far back as the 80s, but it's kind of like supposed to be LA's Bigfoot. And so he's obsessed with uncovering the dollhouse, and so he's kind of the foil to the dollhouse doing their happy, fun, unethical playtime.
Okay, so he's trying to figure out what's going on.
Exactly, yeah, and he kind of gets roped into it in season 2.
Okay.
One of the cool things that I really thought was awesome about this show, I did not watch this show when it was on air. I watched it had to have been shortly after that, because I remember watching it like shortly after I graduated college, and I graduated college in 2010. But I think it was on like Netflix DVDs or something like that when you still did Netflix DVDs. So they are 2 seasons of 13 episodes each. But in season 1, only the first 12 episodes originally aired. This 13th episode never aired on TV. What happened was, whenever they went to go on DVD, they had all of these agreements with different countries, like your contract agreements.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was something random like Singapore. They had contracted a 13 episode season for the DVD release, and they didn't want to be in violation. So they actually created this 13th episode of season 1 that just appeared on the DVDs. So, but what's interesting about this episode is that it does a flash forward.
Oh, okay.
So it feels like season 1 ends, and then you've got this essentially standalone season 1 finale, this 13th episode that has flashed forward 10 years into the future, where it's an apocalyptic hellscape.
Oh, okay.
And it's clear that the technology of this show has just run amok and literally like caused the end of civilization, where it's like, and it's also very a stereotypical apocalypse, like Mad Max style, with like crazy zombie type people running around and, you know, survival of the fittest and all of that. And the characters, the main characters in that episode, are not any of the main characters of the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they are people who are just trying to survive this apocalypse and trying to unravel the mystery of how this apocalypse happened. And it leads them to the Dollhouse, which has clearly been sitting idle for like years. And they're kind of untangling the mystery. And then you immediately go into season 2, which just takes you back to the original story. So you're going through the entirety of season 2 basically with this flash forward of, oh my God, whatever is about to happen in this season is going to cause the end of the world. And you're waiting with that sort of dramatic irony that I've never really seen in a show.
That is fascinating. And it's a really interesting example of how artistic limitations can then create the narrative of the show. Because I imagine one of the reasons why they didn't have any of the main cast in this episode is because it was probably shot for a different budget. They had been contracted for a certain amount of time. Their availability might not have been something they could work around. And so they get these other people just to make it work. But then because of that, they set it in a different way. Like, that is really interesting.
Right. And they, in that episode, they do some flashbacks to the actual main characters of the Dollhouse, but they're like really small flashbacks that later in season 2, you see the context of them and how they actually happen. So you're like waiting for that particular scene. Like you see one of the characters has been shot and they're like on the run and you're like, how did that happen? And then so finally when that happens in season 2, you're like, oh, this ties into this and this was that. And like there's big dramatic reveals. I love dramatic irony when it's done right. And I feel like this is an accidental dramatic irony that made season 2 more stressful to watch.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's crazy. And I'm guessing that what happened was they filmed season 2 before they had to contractually create this 13th episode of season 1. So they were able to pull clips for that. That is really interesting.
Exactly. So that's the flash forward part. It happens in both of the seasons. So spoilers, but things don't go well when you have access to this technology. Essentially, all of this, the various aspects of the technology kind of get out the way that things do. You know, people who want to maintain control, like, oh no, we're the only ones that are going to use them. Like, we can use them however we want. And it gets out and it spreads and winds up taking out civilization.
That's really interesting to think about right now. And I recognize these technologies are not the same and they're very different, but people talk about that exact same potential problem with AI and how AI is developed. There's these few companies that can do it and they have all these safety, measures, these guardrails on it.
We're being ethical with it.
Right. But then just the very nature of AI and machine learning, other companies are going to be able to, clone that technology and do their own thing with it.
Okay, so there's obviously a ton of futuristic tech in Dollhouse. And so obviously we're not living in an apocalyptic hellscape of our own making.
Are we not? Are we not?
Not at the level that Dollhouse is claiming.
Did you see what I paid for peanut butter last week?
It's so expensive.
It's so expensive.
Eggs. What's up with eggs? But with a lot of sci-fi, that's not the point. The point of sci-fi, science fiction, is not necessarily to be 100% predictive in the same way. It's actually kind of rare, I think, if science fiction is trying to actually literally predict what is going to happen in the future.
Alex, you are undermining the entire concept of this podcast right now. No, every bit of media set in the future is meant to be completely predictive, which is why we make fun of it. No, of course.
Right.
It's not meant to. It's kind of fun to go back over, but it's not meant to be predictive.
It's a way of having social commentary, and at most being, if we continue on this path, this is a possible future if we don't change our ways. So rather than spending the episode talking about, apocalypse didn't happen, Joss Whedon's such an idiot, I figured that it would be more interesting to talk about the technology that's presented on the show and see, are we getting close to where we could have a dollhouse? How close are we?
Okay, that's really interesting. So, mind wipe? What technology are we talking about?
Yeah, so there's a ton of technology that's shown on the show, but I figured we would focus on a few of the big ones. You've got the mind wiping technology that puts people into that active or doll state. You have the imprinting technology, which lets you essentially matrix-like, upload personalities, or later you see it could be just individual skills that get uploaded to somebody.
So very Matrix-like.
Very Matrix-like. You also have the idea of memory storage technology. These people's brains are essentially stored on these hard drives. Some of them are copies of people who are still alive, and some of them are, it's the difference between copy or move, basically.
There's some really interesting implications of that.
Right. When your mind gets put back into your brain, that's just a copy of your mind. But if it's getting put back in your body, does it even matter?
Presumably, originally, it's gone. If you take a file and you drag it onto another hard drive, it is just deleting the first one and copying the second one. Huge caveat. I know nothing about computers, but I think that's what's actually happening.
Right. So those are the three biggies that I figured we talk about. The way that this technology kind of gets out is that they wind up developing a way to remote wipe people as opposed to having to come and sit in this specific chair and go through this process. It's essentially a ray gun that you can just point at somebody and it wipes their brain, or you can point the imprinting ability and it imprints somebody. So you can see, I'm sure you can picture if that got out, somebody's just able to walk down the street and zap people and immediately erase everything that makes them them.
So they've got a TV remote, and they're walking around, and you start having a conversation like, that person's annoying, mute, or change.
Right. And then you have the elite people who want to be able to essentially be immortal, which has if you've seen Westworld, if you've seen the current iteration of Westworld, the HBO show, you know that is something that's dealt with a lot. This idea of immortality and preserving your consciousness through technology. Westworld uses robots.
Right.
But Dollhouse uses real people.
Yeah.
Of being able to, these people don't matter to me. These are just slaves, basically. And I'm going to use their bodies and just upload my brain to them.
That's wild.
Yeah. So how close are we to having these things? All right. Let's talk about brain uploading and mind wiping. I feel like those are some big ones here.
Are we close at all? This sounds completely like it's nonsense.
No, we're not close.
Okay,
We're not.
Okay. I thought you were about to scare me. We're actually about 4 years off from this.
But people are working on it.
Okay, so that does scare me.
It should scare you a little bit. It should make you a little nervous. There are some companies that are working on, I guess, different iterations of this. You have a company called Nectome, which sounds bad.
It sounds bad.
Like necrotome, I don't know. They are a startup, and they're working on a mind uploading service. So this would be the mind upload part, basically digitizing the human brain.
That doesn't seem possible.
So this seems kind of like a variation of cryogenics to me.
Okay.
They're using this chemical solution that can potentially preserve a body for hundreds or even thousands of years. And the idea is that they are going to perfectly preserve the brain so that it's kind of like cryogenics. When the technology to exist to digitize it is invented, they'll be able to do that seamlessly. There is one caveat to this service, though. It will 100% kill you.
Well, okay. I have so many reactions. One, we have to do an episode on cryogenics.
We have to.
Because it's nonsense and it doesn't make any sense. And any reputable doctor is like, no, you're just destroying the tissue right now.
Yeah.
And it's a way to scam people who are just terrified of death.
Mm-hmm.
But yours is a way to scam people who are terrified of death by killing them?
Yeah. So
at least with cryogenics, they wait for you to die and then as soon as possible, cut off your head and put it in some freezing liquid.
No. That's too late. It's too late at that point. You have to give them this chemical solution that perfectly preserves them at that moment. So they're currently looking into places that in countries that use assisted suicide as possible avenues for test subjects for that, and kind of meshing their service with the assisted suicide service. And that's the method by which you do it. And they're going to kind of preserve your brain.
Do they have any volunteers?
Unclear.
Okay.
But they're trying. And I like how it's, we're not cryogenics. We're not going to freeze your brain. We're going to put in a chemical solution that's going to perfectly preserve it. It's the same thing, but worse somehow.
The part that gets me is just that I don't think we understand enough exactly how the human brain works to even begin this at this moment. I mean, human memory is kind of weird because we don't truly store information. And yet, if you played a version of a song that I know really well, but one small thing is off, I would immediately know that, oh, this isn't the original version.
Right.
But I don't have a perfect copy stored somewhere in my brain at the same time.
Yeah. Memory's weird.
Memory's weird.
So that's not looking super... I have a feeling this is going to kind of go the cryogenics route, but you never know.
Okay.
You also have another avenue that I feel like is going to be far more likely, mostly because it's the lamer avenue, and I feel like that's what we go with. And that's just the idea of the digitization of human consciousness through using voice synthesis and taking all, digital records of you, like the Be Right Back episode of Black Mirror where the woman's husband dies and she uploads all of his social media and everything to create a facsimile of him. That's something that people are working on.
This seems really possible right now.
Especially with AI, right?
Yeah, that type of machine learning, if it's just got enough data, it could replicate you.
Right.
But one thing that would be different, and I don't know, maybe they could account for this, is that we are not always the exact same.
No.
We learn new things. We get into new things.
Mm-hmm.
If not for you, I never would have played Dungeons and Dragons. And I've got a bookshelf full of stuff.
So many.
Over there. Can it account for that is my question.
That's a great question. And then there's also how much of what you put on paper or digitally is you. There's so much of my life and the way that I talk and interact that is different from if I'm talking on this podcast right now, or if you are snapping a video of me, or even, journal entries. It's all filtered, right? It's not the same thing as my human existence. So I feel like it would always be this outwardly projected version of myself minus a lot of the internal neuroses, which may not be a bad thing, but it's not quite me, right?
Right. I mean, I've heard you talk to your grandma.
Oh, God.
Your accent changes.
It does. I get far more Southern.
You become a different person. And that's the way that we all are.
Mm-hmm.
We have this interesting form of mimicry with a lot of the people who are important in our lives.
Code switching.
And again, can it account for that?
Right.
And maybe, because AI can be really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
but what happens when you introduce a new person?
Right.
How much data would it need to do this? Honestly, this is something that does seem possible,
Mm-hmm.
but would never be perfect.
It'd never be perfect unless you digitize your entire life. You had cameras following you 24/7. You had ways to kind of upload your thoughts to something. With this one, I also have a nice little nested prediction for you in our prediction episode. There are some scientists that predict that this technology could actually be possible by the end of 2023. So I think we need to revisit this as an idea after that to see where are we in December.
Okay. All right. Would you do this?
I've got real heebie-jeebies when it comes to any sort of digital mind uploading, or would you want your mind put into a robot, or even teleportation. Anything that I feel like involves the destruction of myself and it's just a copy of me, what's the point? What's the point of uploading my digital consciousness if when I die, I'm gone? I want some immortal version of myself that isn't even me running around. That doesn't seem in any way enjoyable or something I would want.
I think that's a good point. Also, you're also correct that Star Trek 100% every time they beam down, they're just murdering the person.
Yes.
And then creating a copy. And then they beam back up and they murder the person and they create a new copy.
They established that in an episode. That's canon.
Isn't there an evil Riker one episode?
It's not an evil Riker. It's just a copy of him because the technology kind of messes up and they don't destroy the original one. Yeah, it's messed up. Teleportation is messed up. And I'm going to be 98 years old and they're going to have perfected that technology and my great-grandchildren are going to be like, Grandma, you never come to visit us. And I'm going to be like, you're right. Because I'm not teleporting my body. They kill you, you know. It's just a facsimile of you that appears on the other side. I'm going to be like, Grandma, you are crazy. 100% will never teleport. No. Another one that I feel like we have to talk about, even though I know neither of us probably want to, is Neuralink.
Oh, no.
We got to talk about it. We got to talk about Neuralink.
Okay, all right.
For those of you who have no idea why we are outwardly cringing right now,
pause the podcast and don't learn. You don't need to know.
Neuralink is one of Elon Musk's current startup ventures, and what they are working on doing, essentially, is developing this brain-machine interface that will connect humans and computers together. It'll make you semi-digital. If you ever read the young adult novel Feed,
oh yeah,
it's kind of like that. So your brain will be connected to the internet. And
why would we want that? Oh my God, I don't need memes injected into my thoughts.
So Elon Musk's argument is twofold. One, he has suggested that this technology could eventually let us download our brains into robots or whatever, that this could be a way to transfer consciousness.
And he would probably be one of the first ones, which is a great argument against this technology.
He has also lately started to make the argument that this is a way to keep us from becoming obsolete through AI. That if we are able to integrate our brains with AI, that humanity will still be relevant and we won't be overtaken by AI.
What is he talking about?
I don't know.
Humanity's going to become obsolete?
Well, you know, there's some people who are sounding the alarm with AI that, you know, if we're not careful about our use of it, that it's going to cause us to not have jobs. The whole AI takeover.
No, but that's good. That's what eventually gets us to the Star Trek, you know, there are no jobs and we all just pursue our best lives. I don't want to make sure that it's possible or that it's required that I always work.
Have you learned nothing from the 15-hour work week? The government will never let that happen. They will never just give us money to just live and not work. That's not going to happen. So do you want to know how it actually is supposed to work?
I have intentionally never learned, so yeah, let's go for it.
So the technology involves this, it's described as kind of like a tiny sewing machine that implants these threads that are thinner than human hair.
Well, he's going to change that name now.
Oh. That's good. These not threads, definitely not threads, TM, directly into the brain. So it's these very, very, very thin wires that would get basically sewn into the brain. And these threads have electrodes that can monitor the activity of individual neurons, and then they transmit information to this external chip. This chip is supposed to be the size of a coin. It'll be capable of wireless charging, supposedly, and then it's implanted flush with your skull, so you look and feel totally normal.
Okay.
So it's like this external chip that's implanted into your skull that connects to these wires that are, I'm trying to avoid saying the word threads. Maybe I should say the word threads a lot. These threads into your brain. And that's the interface that will then connect with the computer. I feel like a lot of these technologies try to start out by saying we're going to use them for medical applications.
Sure.
A lot of these different technologies that I've looked at is to help with medical research. And that's how it always starts, right? Even in Dollhouse, I think that was supposedly their original idea, is that they would take people that were suffering from PTSD and trauma and in really bad places in their lives, and it would essentially give them this 5-year break for their brain to heal so that whenever they're put back in their original body, their brain has had time to process without having to go through the hard stuff of processing. So I feel like he was spot on with this idea of it's always going to start with the, quote, medical research.
Starts with medical research, and then it ends with just straight up hate speech.
Yeah.
I don't need Twitter's trending page uploaded straight to my brain.
Right.
That would just create stress.
So the technology theoretically could, for example, help paraplegics who have lost the ability to move or sense because of a spinal cord injury. It kind of would do some rerouting of things.
I feel like we've seen this a little bit with the ability to read some type of neural patterns and have that interact with a prosthesis so that it can grasp and do other type of, small actions.
Yeah, there's something called brain gate, which is really doing a lot to help with paraplegics have the ability to move things. You're essentially moving things with your mind, but it's not telekinesis, obviously. It's using the electrical signals. So there's definitely concurrent technology that's being developed by all these different systems. But Elon Musk, wants to use his. Yeah. He also has mentioned that he thinks that the chip can improve memory, enhance cognitive abilities, store memories as a backup, which, memories is a weird thing, so I'd be curious to see what that's like. But Musk also just says things, so whatever.
Did you hear that Tesla's going to have fully automated self-driving cars next year? He has apparently said that for 4 straight years.
I thought that they already had self-driving cars.
Well, there are tiers for self-driving.
Oh.
So the current tier is tier 2, where it can self-drive, but you have to have an active human kind of ready to take the wheel at any point.
Okay.
And he says fully automated is next year, but they haven't gotten to that part, even though other companies have.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was BMW or Porsche or somebody has said that they've come out with that. So the current status of Neuralink, they've had some successful animal trials. There was a monkey named Pager that was able to play a game of Pong using only his mind, using the Neuralink implant. However, I should mention that they have faced a ton of criticism over their treatment of animals. There have been some really problematic things that have happened during these animal trials where a lot of animals have died during this process in ways that are even unacceptable to people who see animal trials as being, part of science.
Yeah, because animal trials are, and animals do die as a part of trials. That's something that we accept as a society, but we don't often look into because it can make us really uncomfortable.
Right.
So you're saying that outside of the acceptable ways that this happens, it's even worse.
Even worse. A lot of them were killed due to just rushing testing procedures, not waiting enough to be able to improve the technology. They just wanted to start monkey first kind of thing. They're currently seeking approval from the FDA to start human trials, and knowing how much they rushed the animal trials, I think you would have to be completely dumb to volunteer for these human trials in the beginning.
And yet, I've seen some people with blue checks who would be the first to sign up.
100%, yeah. The FDA has raised some really valid concerns. Apparently, the device uses a lithium battery, which...
Don't those blow up? Those blow up.
Yeah, think about what has happened to cell phones.
My cell phone blew up last year.
Yeah. So now picture that embedded in your skull.
Oh, God.
They also are concerned about the potential for these wires to move around, to migrate in the brain, go places that they're not supposed to. Like, things wander in the body,
What?
They also are concerned with, but what if somebody doesn't want this anymore? Is there a safe way to remove these wires without damaging the brain tissues? Or is this a permanent thing?
So can you not just have it taken out?
I don't know. I think the FDA is just asking questions. So Neuralink is trying to resolve these issues.
So it's kind of like how you can't delete your Threads account without deleting your Instagram account.
Yeah, essentially. Threads. Threads.
The message of this podcast is that threads are permanent.
Obviously, there's some socioeconomic implications of this, which are explored in countless other sci-fi where you have enhanced people Gattaca deals with the idea of enhanced people. Feed, which is a book I mentioned earlier, deals with that.
Oh, those are both great, too. I love that book, and I love the movie Gattaca.
You've read Feed?
Yeah.
I loved that book. I would love to reread that now because it's been so long. Is there anything that we've gotten right or wrong? It does not have a specific date. I've already checked.
You saw my hands get into Google position.
There's a book I'm reading right now, Clara and the Sun, that's dealing with the idea of lifted kids that have these genetic and brain things that have happened to them that makes them more cognitively able over other people. So people who would have this Neuralink, there's concerns that they would create this new tier of society, right? Which could be problematic. And then moving away from Neuralink, because I would like to not talk about Elon Musk any more than I absolutely have to, there's just the idea of transhumanism. Are you familiar with that?
There's a lot of people who have lots of thoughts on Twitter about transhumanism.
Oh, no. Not that. Not that.
Okay. Then I'm completely unfamiliar.
This is not a specific science thing or a company. This is more like a philosophical movement that supports the use of technology to enhance human intellect and physiology. The concept of mind uploading is based on the premise that the human brain can be understood and replicated, that our brain is like a computer. So if we can understand it enough, we can manipulate it and hack it like we can any computer. Transhumanists are people who would love the idea of putting our brains into robots.
Okay.
Kind of becoming cyborgs and things like that.
Would you want to be a cyborg?
Not my brain. That's the thing. I just don't want you to mess with my brain. If my brain can stay in my body and you just add enhancements to my body, maybe. It'd be cool. I like the idea of being strong. Will it make me taller? I'd also like that.
I mean, in some ways we do this. SSRIs are a way to enhance your brain in some way.
Or, well, maybe. I think a lot of people argue that SSRIs bring your brain back to the state that it's originally supposed to be in. It's not changing your brain, it's bringing your brain back to neutral.
And that makes sense, but what if I could increase my focus using this? What if
You mean Adderall?
Right. What if I could basically have a switch that's like, I need to work on something. I don't want to. And just like work mode, bloop, bloop. And just intense focus, but without the use of, drugs.
Right. Would it have more side effects, less side effects? But then you get into the implications of who's owning this technology. Are you leasing this technology? Can they come and repo my cyborg arm?
No, all software in the future is leased. You don't own it. So essentially you have to keep paying one per month in order to get features, and then they will downgrade you if you don't,
Right. Are they going to turn off my Neuralink if I don't pay? There's not going to be any permanence. Repo the genetic opera is going to be how we deal with those things.
Wait, is there a date in Repo the Genetic Opera? That's another good one.
Furious Googling. So that's kind of where we are in terms of brain uploading. When it comes to memory erasure, so the brain wiping, that's even less a possibility, I feel like, than the brain uploading stuff. We obviously know that people can have their memories wiped. People can get amnesia from trauma.
Yeah.
We know that that's possible, but the idea of doing it on purpose is really, really hard.
Right, because, amnesia is, I think, a very poorly understood brain injury.
Right, and there are types of drug-induced amnesia that are technically possible, but it is far from an exact science. A lot of it seems to be incidental. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Ketamine, has been said to kind of be able to erase memories of events. Like when you're on ketamine, you can kind of not remember what's happening. But as you and I know from the birth of our son, that does not always happen. And sometimes you retain all those memories of things. And that was also the first time I learned that ketamine is used for more than recreational drugs or horse tranquilizer. But sometimes they will medically give you that if you were in pain, which was wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
You also have the idea of psychological therapy tactics. Brainwashing doesn't really exist.
Hollywood was obsessed with this, especially in the Cold War era, and the use of brainwashing in order to activate spies or there were a lot of POWs and people captured. Could we then brainwash them? But yeah, my understanding is that's not really a real thing.
No, there's something called decoded neurofeedback, which uses psychological therapy tactics with machine learning as a way to recondition painful memories, like to help people who are struggling with PTSD.
Okay.
Use a reconditioning technique. It's not removing the bad memories. It's getting you to kind of process them in a different way, take different pathways through your brain.
So is that kind of like the thing I saw on Reddit where if you have a traumatic event, what you should do is play Tetris?
What? What is this?
I've seen this multiple times. I have no idea if it's right. But they said if you have some type of traumatic event, and it can be something like you were in a car accident that day, and there's often very real stress that comes later from those things, the
Sure.
PTSD.
I've been in a car accident and I have dealt with those feelings before.
That what you can do is play Tetris while you're processing that initially, and it helps you in the future.
Wild. Okay. Interesting.
And it's not, of course, Tetris specifically, but that type of, I guess, somewhat mindless way of interacting with something.
Interesting. There are some direct brain technologies that are being developed that are trying to more specifically target memories. Again, these are always medical first. It's treating things like Parkinson's or, like I've mentioned before, trying to find treatments for people with PTSD to maybe alter those memories or disrupt memory formation. There's something called optogenetics, which I feel like is the closest that we've gotten to successfully erasing literal specific memories.
Okay. Like a line item veto, but for your memories.
Exactly. It's only been used on mice, and it used light. That's why it's optogenetics, is using these beams of light. But it's still obviously very experimental, and if they're only at the mouse phase, then it's clearly got a long way to go. But they are starting to get there, to be able to figure memories out a little bit.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I am moderately more complex than a mouse.
And then the last one, we've got the imprinting. So the imprinting and ability enhancements, I feel like, go hand in hand. It's the idea of just uploading something into your brain. This is Matrix style.
Whoa, I know Kung Fu.
I know Kung Fu. Yeah. So like that. How close do you think that we are to that?
I think that we have to be exceptionally far away from that. Of all of the things we've talked about, I feel like this is the least problematic. Getting a skill feels better than erasing memories or
uploading brains
or any of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it feels pretty far away to me.
I'm pretty much going in order of what I feel like we're the closest to the furthest away. There is some technology that's being developed not only by individual organizations, I guess we'll say, but also by DARPA is working on this ability. DARPA is working on a program called Targeted Neuroplasticity Training, which shortens to TNT. I feel like they could have come up with a better initialism for that. But what they're trying to do with that is enhancing learning of skills by stimulating these peripheral nerves to boost the release of brain chemicals during training. So you're still doing the training, but you're getting this learning boost. It's letting you, I guess maybe your brain have more plasticity. Because if you think about it, there's a reason why they always say that it's easier to learn things when you're younger. Your brain has this plasticity, which basically means flexibility. The ability to form these new pathways is so much easier when you're younger. If you're trying to teach somebody a language, teaching them when they're a little kid is infinitely easier than when you're an adult. So what it seems like to me, using my non-scientific background, just trying to dive into this, is that they're trying to stimulate that in adults.
Okay.
Bring back that ability to learn things really fast.
That'd be great. It would be cool to learn how to play an instrument, but with my 42-year-old brain working like I was, say, 12.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's other variations of this that I won't get into the specifics, but yeah, we're so far away from being able to even have enhanced learning, let alone uploading the ability to play violin into my brain, let alone being able to upload somebody else's brain into my brain. That's probably the farthest away that we are. So, all in all, pretty far away from Dollhouse, which I think is a good thing. The show does not try to, at any point, make it seem like this would be a benefit to society. I do appreciate the fact that the show constantly hammers home, this is bad. This is slavery. You can't have people sign away their lives for 5 years and call it anything but that, right?
Right. Which, does lead me to a few questions. How exactly in the show does this technology lead to an apocalypse? I understand what you've said about clearly it's bad, but does the show really get into the mechanics of how this truly goes haywire?
Sort of, yeah. So you have this technology, and the people who are at the head of the corporation really want to be able to use it to extend their own lives. They see the dolls and anybody that is not them as cattle, basically, that they can use.
The way rich people do.
Right. And then you find out, this is kind of the dramatic irony part of it, where there's going to be an apocalypse, but you don't know how it's created. So Topher Brink kind of develops the mind-wiping technology.
The remote
wipe, essentially, as a way to just handle this one situation that they're in, this one specific circumstance where they have to mind wipe this active that they physically cannot bring back into the dollhouse. They can't access him. So he kind of develops this incidentally, and then it spirals out of there. The mind-wiping technology now is free from having to be in the dollhouse to do. It gets put into a gun-like device, which then gets used for selling to militaries and governments and unscrupulous people who want to use it as a weapon of war. And from there, you can kind of see, you don't have to have it spelled out for you how the domino effect starts.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a completely different type of warfare. If you don't have to kill your opponents, you simply have to target them with this mind wipe, and then they are taken off of the battlefield.
Because they become completely docile once their minds are wiped. They are, in a lot of ways, very childlike and innocent and trusting. And so you do that to an entire field of people.
You immediately win.
And you immediately win. Furthermore, there's another person who was originally a doll who kind of went crazy through things that don't matter for the purposes of this podcast. But he figures out a way to do a remote wipe via a sound through a phone. So calling somebody and then wipes that person.
Wow.
So I think that there were some sort of implications that governments use this on their own people, sent out a signal, because then you basically can control a large population. And that's what happened there.
And it's also an interesting way to assassinate a world leader without assassinating them. If I could call Vladimir Putin and play a sound.
Exactly.
And would that be more morally defensible?
Well, something else that you can do that they explore is the idea of people getting put into an active or doll-like state, and then they get uploaded with themselves. It's literally themselves, like their own brain, but with certain things altered or changed or cut out. So let's say you wanted an influential senator who is ambitious and would maybe one day be a great candidate for president, but you want him to fully be in your pocket. You upload his brain, you wipe him, you mess with his brain so that he will be exactly the kind of like Manchurian candidate that you want him to be. You can make him into some sort of sleeper agent if you want to. And then you put him back in his own brain with those things taken out or adjusted. The implications for that are alarming. So it's not just wiping Vladimir Putin, it's then putting a version of him back into his brain where he will do anything that you tell him to do.
And so within Dollhouse, clearly, and you say they don't show this, but it starts to escalate. Countries start to use this against each other, and then society basically collapses.
Exactly. And then it's not really explained how, but some of them turn into these feral zombie-like butchers who just want to eat you. I don't really quite know how that happens. It kind of is like the Reavers in Firefly. I think he just wanted some sort of conflict
maybe
added in there.
But you could also see that maybe it was someone using the off-brand, the Rose Art version of this technology.
Sure, yeah, it like made people feral. You also see they then have this ability in the future to keep these flash drives of different skills that they can, some people hack into their brain and upload those things. They keep like a little keychain or a necklace of these different flash drives.
Are they literally like USB drives?
Yeah. They're 100% USB. They just put them behind their ear into the back.
I love when you have something so futuristic, but it relies on what is an old technology in order to demonstrate through your fiction.
Oh, yeah. I love the hard drives, are nice, big, chunky, with weight hard drives. That's what the brains get put on. I love stuff like that.
There's this clip I saw of Star Trek where they showed somebody with their tablets. Because Star Trek predicted that we would have tablets. Mm-hmm. But they had a different tablet for every application.
That's amazing.
Because they didn't foresee that we could just load a lot of applications on one thing.
Yeah. And there's tons of other media that I feel like deals with these similar technologies. I've mentioned Westworld. That's dealing with robots, not people. And if you remember, in Westworld, they never get that technology really right. Maybe Dollhouse was onto something by, instead of uploading into robots, you just upload into actual people. So for me, Dollhouse, I kind of have this headcanon that it's like, if Westworld figured out you don't need to use robots.
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe they're in the same universe.
Maybe. There's also Be Right Back, we mentioned, with Black Mirror, which deals with the idea of kind of creating a consciousness using AI. Altered Carbon, if you've seen that show or read those books, deals with the idea of making copies of yourself and essentially growing clones. And obviously there's a lot of Matrix influence in that as well. So yeah, all that being said, would you want to do any of that?
The only thing that I would ever want to do is the skill upload.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine you've got to learn a new program and you don't have to watch the YouTube tutorial or look through the FAQ. You can just be like, here's how you use it. And you just automatically know all the little ins and outs.
Just saving so much time.
It would save so much time. But every other part of this is horrifying.
Absolutely. 100% unethical, horrifying. Hope that it never comes true, but it seems like there's always going to be people who are trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, that's our show. Thank you so much to those of you who have already taken the time to rate and review us online. If you like Mistopian and you haven't yet, please take a moment to rate and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's really the biggest and best way you can help us make sure this podcast has a future. You can follow us at Mistopian Pod on all the major social media outlets, though we're mostly active on Instagram and lately, Threads? ?
To a certain extent.
You can also check out our website, mistopianpod.com, to get more details about the sources and information used on our show. If you want to drop us a line, you can shoot us a DM on social media, or you can email us at contact@mistopianpod.com. You can follow me on Threads and Instagram at IamTheBestAlex, and Patrick on KiwiBox, the now defunct online teen hangout site I spent the majority of our AOL minutes on.
Why do you keep putting me in stuff with teens? No teens.
Until next time, remember, our world today is neither utopian nor dystopian. It's simply mistopian. Okay, so you talked about really wanting the skill upload. Let's say it's incredibly expensive. You've scrimped and saved pennies and you can upload one skill. Like you get the chance to sit in that chair one time and you can upload something into your brain that you do not have to learn the conventional way. What's that going to be?
There's a lot of options. Mm-hmm. There's one thing that I have tried to do several times over the past few years and never gotten right.
Ooh, okay. What's that?
To make a fried egg the way that you want it.
What?
I haven't gotten it yet. When I do get it, it takes 4 eggs.
It's just a sunny side up egg.
But I can't do it.
It's the easiest egg.
It's not. I mean, that's objectively not true. Scrambled is the easiest.
You crack it and then you just leave it alone.
But it always sticks. I overcook part. I don't get the flip right.
We've saved thousands of dollars for you to get in this skill uploading. I would be so mad at you.
Until I made you breakfast.